Rancher saved a stranger in a blizzard. Unaware, she ruled the largest ranch in the territory. The wind screamed across the Montana plains like a wounded animal. Jake Morrison gripped his horse's reins tighter as snow pelted his face hard enough to draw blood. He should have turned back an hour ago, but the cattle were still out there somewhere, lost in the white madness that had swallowed the world. His fingers were going numb inside his gloves when he saw something dark against the snow. Not cattle. A horse, riderless, its saddle caked with ice. Jake's gut twisted. Someone was out here on foot. He pushed his mare forward, squinting through the blizzard until he spotted a figure collapsed in a snowdrift 20 yards ahead. He dismounted and ran, his boots sinking deep with each step. The person was small, bundled in a heavy coat, face down and not moving. Jake dropped to his knees and turned the body over. A woman. Young, maybe 30, her lips already blue. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck and felt a faint pulse. No time to waste. Jake hauled her up and threw her over his shoulder, staggering back to his horse. Getting her into the saddle took everything he had left. He climbed up behind her, wrapped one arm around her waist to keep her upright, and turned his mare toward home. The ride back was pure hell. The wind tried to rip them both off the horse. Snow piled up so thick he could barely see his mare's ears. He talked to the woman the whole way, not sure if she could hear him, just needing to hear a human voice in all that howling white. His ranch house appeared like a ghost through the storm. Jake practically fell off his horse, dragging the woman with him. He kicked open the door and carried her straight to the fireplace. Her clothes were frozen stiff. He stripped off her coat, boots, and outer layers with shaking hands, then wrapped her in every blanket he owned. He built up the fire until it roared, then heated water for tea. Her eyelids fluttered after 10 minutes. 20 minutes later, she opened her eyes. They were gray, sharp even through the confusion of near death. She tried to sit up. Jake pushed her back down gently. You stay put. You almost froze to death out there. She blinked at him, taking in the small ranch house, the crackling fire, his weather-beaten face. Where am I? Morrison Ranch. About 15 miles south of Helena. I found you in the blizzard. Her eyes widened slightly. My horse? Gone when I found you. What were you doing out there? She hesitated, and Jake saw something flicker across her face. Calculation, maybe. Or fear. I got lost. I was traveling to Helena when the storm hit. It came out of nowhere. Jake nodded. It did that. These spring blizzards are the worst kind. No warning. He handed her a cup of hot tea. She took it with trembling hands. Thank you. You saved my life. Jake shrugged. Anybody would have done it. What's your name? She paused again, just a heartbeat too long. Kate. Kate Wilson. I'm Jake Morrison. You can stay here until the storm passes. Probably be a day or 2. Kate nodded, wrapping her hands around the cup. She studied him over the rim, those gray eyes missing nothing. It couldn't shake the feeling she was measuring him somehow, weighing him on scales he couldn't see. He told himself he was imagining things. She was just a traveler caught in bad weather, nothing more. But something about the quality of her clothes, the expensive leather of her boots, the way she held herself even half frozen, told him different. This was no ordinary woman. The blizzard howled outside, shaking the walls. Jake threw another log on the fire and wondered what he'd really brought into his home. The storm didn't let up for 3 days. Jake gave Kate his bed and slept on the floor by the fire. She protested, but he wouldn't hear it. His mama raised him right. On the second morning he woke to find her already up, standing at the window and staring out at the endless white. You worried about something? Jake asked, rolling up his blankets. She turned, and he saw dark circles under her eyes. I need to get to Helena. It's important. Jake poured coffee from the pot on the stove. Nobody's going anywhere in this. The drifts are 10 feet high in places. She bit her lip, clearly frustrated. When he handed her a cup, their fingers touched, and he felt calluses, working hands like his own. That was interesting. Most women who could afford clothes like hers didn't do manual labor. Over breakfast, she asked about his ranch. Jake told her the truth. It wasn't much. 200 acres, most of it grazing land. He ran about 50 head of cattle, did some horse trading on the side. It was a living, barely. He'd inherited the place from his father 5 years back and had been trying to make it work ever since. And you work it alone? Kate asked. Just me and my hired hand, Pete. He's holed up at his sister's place in town. Lucky bastard. Kate smiled at that, the first real smile he'd seen from her. It changed her whole face, made her look younger, less guarded. You must be tough, working a ranch by yourself. Jake shrugged. You do what you have to do. What about you? What's waiting for you in Helena? She looked down at her coffee. Business. Family business? Nothing more specific than that. Jake let it drop, but his curiosity was growing. That afternoon, the wind finally died down enough for him to check on his animals. Kate insisted on coming with him. Jake tried to talk her out of it, but she was stubborn. In the barn, she moved around the horses like she'd been born in a stable. She knew exactly how to approach them, how to check their legs, how to brush them down. This isn't your first time around livestock, Jake observed. She glanced at him, caught. No. I grew up on a ranch. Where? Far from here. They worked in comfortable silence after that. Jake found himself enjoying her company. She didn't chatter or complain. She just worked, efficient and capable. When they headed back to the house, she stumbled in a deep drift. Jake caught her arm, steadying her. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Something warm despite the cold. That night, they sat by the fire and talked. Really talked. Kate asked him about his dreams for the ranch, and Jake found himself opening up in ways he rarely did. He wanted to expand, maybe get into breeding quarter horses, but it took capital he didn't have. The bank had turned him down for a loan twice already. Said he was too small, too risky. It's hard to grow when nobody will give you a chance, he said bitterly. Kate nodded slowly. I know something about that. She told him a story about being young and wanting to prove herself, about men who thought she couldn't do what they could. She kept it vague, no specific details, but Jake heard the truth in her voice. She'd fought for everything she had. He respected that. On the third morning, Jake woke to sunlight streaming through the window. The storm had passed. He should have been relieved, but instead he felt a strange reluctance. Kate would leave now. He'd probably never see her again. She was already packing when he made coffee. I need to get to Helena today. Can I borrow a horse? I'll send someone back with it. Jake nodded. Take the bay mare. She's steady. Kate hesitated, then crossed the room to him. Thank you, Jake. For everything. You're a good man. He felt heat rise to his face. Just did what anyone would do. No. Kate's voice was firm. Not everyone would have ridden out in that blizzard. Not everyone would have given up their bed and asked no questions. You're a rare kind of man, Jake Morrison. She held out her hand. He shook it, formal and strange after 3 days of easy companionship. Kate mounted the bay mare with practiced ease. She looked down at him, something sad in her eyes. Maybe I'll see you again. Maybe. Jake watched her ride away until she was just a speck on the white horizon. Then he went back inside and tried to forget about gray eyes and mysterious women. Life went back to normal. Pete returned from town with stories about the blizzard. 3 people had died in Helena. Jake thought about how close Kate had come to being number 4. 2 weeks passed. Jake was mending fence when he saw riders coming. A lot of riders. At least a dozen, moving fast across his land. His hand went to the rifle on his saddle. You didn't get that many men together unless there was trouble. They rode up in a cloud of dust, and Jake recognized the man in front. Charlie Henderson, foreman of the Double R Ranch. The biggest spread in the territory, over 50,000 acres of prime grazing land. Jake had never met the owner, some reclusive type who stayed out of local affairs. What can I do for you, Charlie? Jake asked, keeping his voice neutral. Charlie touched his hat brim. Mr. Morrison, I'm here on behalf of my employer. She'd like to speak with you. She? The owner of the Double R was a woman? Charlie gestured, and the riders parted. A figure rode through on a magnificent black stallion. Jake's world tilted sideways. It was Kate, but not Kate. This woman wore expensive riding clothes, custom-made boots, a hat that cost more than Jake made in a month. Her hair was pinned up, her face composed and formal. She looked like money and power and everything Jake wasn't. But those eyes were the same, gray and sharp and looking right through him. Hello, Jake. Her voice was different, colder, more controlled. Kate? She dismounted in one smooth motion. Not exactly. My full name is Catherine Rose Brennan. I own the Double R Ranch. I'm the woman you saved in the blizzard. Jake just stared at her, his mind racing. The Double R. The largest ranch in Montana Territory. Probably the largest in 3 territories. And he'd had the owner sleeping in his house, eating his food, working in his barn. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed to know what kind of man you really were. Catherine's voice softened slightly. Without my name, my money, my power. Just Jake Morrison and Kay Wilson. 2 people trapped in a storm. And now you know, Jake said, feeling something hard settle in his chest. What exactly do you know, Miss Brennan? You're honest. Hardworking. Kind. Catherine took a step closer. That you saved my life without expecting anything in return. That you have dreams and determination and integrity. Jake crossed his arms. So what? You came all this way to tell me I'm a decent guy. Congratulations to me. I came to offer you a job. Jake blinked. What? I need a new operations manager for my ranch. Someone I can trust. Someone who knows cattle and horses and hard work. Someone who won't try to cheat me or underestimate me because I'm a woman. The pay is $300 a month, plus housing and a percentage of profits. Catherine's eyes locked on his. I want you, Jake Morrison. The world seemed to stop. $300 a month was more than Jake made in 6 months on his own place. But it meant giving up his ranch, his independence, his dream. It meant working for her. For Kate who wasn't Kate. I need to think about it, he heard himself say. Of course. Catherine handed him a card, thick and expensive. That's my address. Let me know within the week. She mounted her horse, and her riders closed ranks around her. She looked like a queen with her army. Just before they rode off, she looked back at him one more time. I meant what I said that last morning, Jake. You're a rare kind of man. Don't let pride make you foolish. Then they were gone, thundering back toward the Double R, leaving Jake standing in his half-mended fence line with a business card in his hand and his whole world turned upside down. Jake didn't sleep that night. He sat on his porch and watched the stars wheel overhead while his mind churned. $300 a month. He could pay off his debts in a year, save enough to really expand in 2. But he'd be working for someone else. Working for her. Catherine Brennan, richest woman in the territory, who'd lied to him for 3 days. Except she hadn't really lied, had she? She'd just not told him everything. And he understood why now. How many men had tried to use her, marry her, steal from her because of what she owned? Of course she'd want to know who he really was before revealing herself. By dawn, Jake had made his decision. He rode into Helena that morning and sent a telegram to the Double R. 2 words. I accept. The reply came back within an hour. Report Monday. Bring your horse. The next few days were a blur. Jake sold his cattle to his neighbor for a fair price. He couldn't sell the land, not yet. Some part of him needed to know he had something to come back to if this all went wrong. Pete agreed to watch over the place for a cut of any income from leasing the grazing rights. On Monday morning, Jake rode up to the Double R Ranch and stopped dead. He'd heard stories about the main house, but nothing prepared him for the reality. It was a mansion, 3 stories of white stone and dark wood, with wide porches and tall windows that caught the morning sun. The barn complex alone was bigger than his entire ranch. Stables for 200 horses, bunkhouses for 50 men, a smithy, a carpenter's shop, everything a small town might need. A young hand met him at the gate. Mr. Morrison? Miss Brennan is expecting you. Follow me. Jake followed, feeling more out of place with every step. Men stopped working to stare at him as he passed. He heard whispers. That's the new operations manager. Where'd she find him? Heard he saved her life. The kid led him to the main house and right through the front door. Jake had never been inside a place like this. Hardwood floors polished to a shine, paintings on the walls, furniture that looked like it came from back east. Catherine was waiting in a large office, standing behind a massive oak desk covered with papers and ledgers. She looked up when he entered, and for just a second her formal mask slipped. Relief showed in her eyes. You came. You offered me a job. I'm here to work. She smiled, and it was Kate's smile, warm and genuine. Because I have a problem, and I need someone I can trust to help me solve it. What kind of problem? Someone is stealing from me. Cattle, mostly. At least 200 head in the last 6 months. Catherine moved to a map on the wall marked with red pins. Here, here, and here. Always from the northern ranges. Always at night. Always clean. No witnesses, no trace. You've got 50 men working here. None of them can track down some rustlers? I don't know which of my men I can trust. Catherine's voice was tight with frustration. My foreman, Charlie Henderson, is loyal, but someone on this ranch is either involved or looking the other way. I need fresh eyes. Someone who doesn't have connections to the old crews. Jake studied the map. The pattern was clear once he saw it. The thefts were moving east, following the roughest terrain where cattle could be moved without being seen from the main roads. They're driving them toward the border, he said. Probably have a buyer set up in Dakota Territory. Can you prove it? Not yet, but I can find out. Jake turned to her. I'll need authority to go anywhere on the ranch, talk to anyone, look at any records. and I'll need to do it quietly. If someone is dirty, I don't want them knowing I'm coming." Catherine nodded. "Done. You'll have full access. Report only to me. Where do I start?" "With the night crews. Someone has to be watching when these cattle disappear. Find out who was on duty each time." Jake spent the next 2 weeks learning the ranch. It was a massive operation, and Catherine ran it with an iron hand wrapped in velvet. She knew every aspect of her business, from breeding schedules to market prices to which hands could be trusted with the difficult horses. The men respected her, most of them. A few muttered about women not belonging in ranching, but they kept it quiet. Charlie Henderson became Jake's guide to the complex social world of the Double R. The foreman was 60, weathered as an old boot, and sharp as a new knife. He'd worked for Catherine's father and stayed on when she inherited. "She's the best boss I've ever had," Charlie told Jake over coffee one morning. Twice as smart as her daddy, and he was no fool. But there's men who can't stand taking orders from a woman, no matter how good she is. "You think one of them is behind the rustling?" "Could be. Or could be simple greed. 200 head is a lot of money." Jake started with the duty rosters. He cross-referenced every theft with who was working that section of range. 3 names appeared on every single list: Billy Tucker, Frank Morris, and Sam Wade. All 3 were newer hands hired within the last year. All 3 worked the northern ranges. Jake brought his findings to Catherine late one evening. She was still in her office, working by lamplight, her hair coming loose from its pins. She looked tired. "This is good work," she said, studying his notes, "but it's not proof. We need to catch them in the act. So we set a trap. Move a herd to the North Range, make it look like easy pickings, and watch what happens." Catherine looked at him for a long moment. That could be dangerous. If they're desperate enough to steal, they might be desperate enough to kill. I can handle myself. "I know you can." Her voice was soft. "That's not what worries me." "What does worry you?" She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the dark ranch. "I'm worried that I asked you here for selfish reasons, that I'm putting you in danger because I wanted someone I could trust around me." Jake felt something shift in his chest. "Is that the only reason you asked me here?" Catherine turned to face him. The lamplight caught in her hair, turned it gold. "Then I reckon I can make my own choices about what risks to take." They planned the trap carefully. Jake would take a herd of prime beef cattle to the northern range with just 2 trusted hands. They'd make camp in an exposed position, somewhere the rustlers couldn't resist. Charlie would position other men in the hills around them, hidden and ready. It would take time. The rustlers might not strike right away. They'd have to wait. The night before they rode out, Catherine found Jake in the stables. He was checking his saddle, making sure everything was ready. "Be careful out there." Jake looked up at her. "I will. Promise me." Catherine's voice was urgent. "Promise me you'll come back." "Why does it matter so much to you?" Jake asked quietly. She took a step closer, and he could smell lavender, see the pulse beating in her throat. "Because somewhere between freezing to death and lying to you and offering you this job, I started to care what happens to you. And that terrifies me." Jake set down the saddle and moved toward her. "Why does it terrify you?" "Because everyone I care about leaves. My mother died when I was 10. My father 5 years ago. I've learned not to let people get close. It's safer." "Maybe," Jake said, standing close enough now to see gold flecks in her gray eyes. "Or maybe you just haven't met the right people yet." He kissed her. She kissed him back, and it felt like coming home. When they broke apart, Catherine was crying. "Don't die out there, Jake Morrison. Don't you dare." "I'll do my best," he promised. "And when I come back, we're going to talk." "Really talk? About what?" "About why the richest woman in the territory is kissing a broke rancher in her stable." She laughed through her tears. "Maybe I just have poor taste in men, or maybe you're finally being honest about what you want." Catherine pulled him close again, held him tight. "Come back to me." "I will." He meant it with every fiber of his being. The next morning, Jake rode north with 2 hands and 100 head of prime cattle. The trap was set. Now all they had to do was wait for the wolves to show themselves. The northern range was beautiful and deadly. Tall grass rolled away to distant mountains with deep coulees cutting through like scars. Perfect country for hiding cattle. Perfect country for an ambush. Jake made camp in a wide meadow with good grazing and poor sight lines. Anyone watching from the ridges could see they were vulnerable. That was the point. The 2 hands with him were Charlie's nephews, Pete and Danny Rodriguez. Both were young, tough, and loyal to Catherine. They knew the plan and their roles. On the second night, Jake heard horses. He was on watch, sitting near the dying fire, when the sound of hoofbeats drifted across the grassland. He didn't move, didn't react. Just sat there like a man half asleep. 4 riders approached the herd from the north. In the moonlight, Jake recognized Billy Tucker's distinctive hat. They worked quietly, cutting out about 20 head and starting to drive them away. Jake waited until they were committed, the cattle moving. Then he fired 2 shots in the air. The signal. The rustlers panicked. Tucker wheeled his horse and drew his gun, firing wild toward the camp. Jake dove behind his saddle as bullets kicked up dirt around him. The Rodriguez brothers returned fire from their positions. Then Charlie and his men came thundering down from the ridges surrounding the rustlers. It was over in minutes. 3 of the rustlers threw down their guns immediately. But Billy Tucker made a run for it, spurring his horse toward a narrow coulee. Jake swung into his saddle and gave chase. Tucker was a good rider, but Jake's horse was better. They raced through the darkness, horses breathing hard, hooves pounding. Tucker looked back and fired. The bullet missed Jake by inches. He leaned low over his horse's neck and pushed harder. The coulee narrowed. Tucker's horse stumbled on loose rock. Tucker went flying, hit the ground hard, and didn't get up. By the time Jake reached him, Tucker was groaning and clutching his arm. His gun had fallen 10 feet away. Jake dismounted and kicked it further. Charlie and his men arrived moments later. "Well done," Charlie said, breathing hard. "We got all 4 of them." "And the cattle?" "Safe. The Rodriguez boys are driving them back." Tucker glared up at them with hate in his eyes. "You think this proves anything?" "We know you've been stealing from the Double R for months," Charlie said. "And you're going to tell us who you're selling to, or the sheriff is going to make your life very difficult." Tucker spat. "Go to hell." Jake knelt down beside him. "Here's the thing, Billy. We already know most of it. We know you've taken about 200 head. We know you're driving them to Dakota. We've got testimony from honest hands who've seen you in the wrong places at the wrong times. What we need is the name of your buyer and anyone else on the ranch who's involved. If you cooperate, maybe the judge goes easier on you." Tucker's eyes darted between them. Then his shoulders slumped. "His name is Marcus Grant. Runs a stockyard in Deadwood. He pays half market price, no questions asked." Jake and Charlie exchanged glances. Grant was known in the territory, a shady operator who'd been suspected of handling stolen goods before. "Who else is in on it?" Jake pressed. "No one. Just us 4. We kept it small on purpose. Less chance of someone talking. You expect us to believe that?" "It's the truth." Tucker's voice was bitter. "We would have gotten away with it too if she hadn't hired you." They bound Tucker and loaded him on a horse. The ride back to the main ranch took most of the night. Dawn was breaking when they finally arrived. Catherine was waiting on the porch of the main house, still in her night clothes with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. When she saw Jake riding in, alive and whole, she ran down the steps. He dismounted, and she threw herself into his arms right there in front of everyone. "I heard the shots," she whispered against his chest. "I thought you were dead." "I'm fine. It's over. We got 'em all." "Well," she pulled back to look at him, her hands on his face. "Are you hurt?" "Just tired." Catherine turned to Charlie. "Take them to the bunkhouse and keep them locked up. I'll send for the sheriff in the morning." "Yes, ma'am." Charlie tipped his hat and led the prisoners away. The hands who'd been watching started to drift back to their work, giving Jake and Catherine some privacy. "You should get some sleep," Catherine said, but she didn't let go of him. "So should you." "I couldn't. Not until I knew you were safe." Jake pulled her closer. "We need to talk." "I know. But first, sleep." She led him inside, up the grand staircase to a bedroom that was bigger than his entire ranch house had been. "This is the guest room. My room is next door." She touched his face one more time. "Thank you, Jake." "For everything." He caught her hand and kissed her palm. "We're not done talking, Catherine Rose Brennan." "I know." She smiled, tired and beautiful. "But we have time now." "Don't we?" "Yeah." Jake felt the truth of it settle into his bones. "We do." She left him there and he collapsed onto the bed without even taking off his boots. He was asleep in seconds. When he woke, it was late afternoon. Someone had left fresh clothes folded on a chair and hot water in a basin. Jake cleaned up and changed, then went looking for Catherine. He found her in her office, meeting with the sheriff. "Jake Morrison," Sheriff Tom Parker said, shaking his hand. "Charlie tells me you did fine work catching these rustlers." "Just doing my job." The sheriff nodded. "Well, they'll hang for this. Cattle theft is a hanging offense in this territory." After the sheriff left with his prisoners, Catherine and Jake stood in her office, suddenly alone and uncertain. The crisis was over. Now they had to figure out what came next. "I need to ask you something," Catherine said. "Ask. Why did you really take this job? Was it just the money?" "At first, maybe," Jake admitted. But somewhere in the last few weeks it became about more than that. What? You. This ranch. The challenge of it. I like working here, Catherine. I like being part of something bigger than myself, and I like being near you.
Even when you're being stubborn and secretive?
She smiled. I'm stubborn and secretive? You lied to me for 3 days. You didn't ask the right questions. Jake laughed. Fair enough. So where does that leave us? Catherine moved around her desk closer to him. I don't know. I've never done this before. What, trusted someone? Cared about someone who isn't trying to take something from me. She looked vulnerable, and it made Jake's heart ache. I'm not trying to take anything from you, Catherine. I know. That's what scares me. Why? Because if I let myself care about you, really care, I'll have something to lose again. And I've lost enough. Jake cupped her face in his hands. So have I. My parents, my dreams, for my own ranch, the life I thought I'd have. But standing here with you, I don't feel like I've lost anything. I feel like I've found something I didn't even know I was looking for. What's that? A partner. Someone as tough and smart and stubborn as I am. Someone who doesn't need me but wants me anyway. Is that what I am? Catherine's voice was soft. If you want to be. She kissed him, and this time there was no urgency, no fear, just certainty. When they broke apart, she was smiling. She led him out of the office, through the house, and up another flight of stairs to the top floor. There was a room there, with windows on all sides, overlooking the entire ranch. This was my father's room, Catherine said. He'd come up here every evening and look at everything he'd built.
And now it's yours?
Now it's mine. She took Jake's hand. From here, you can see all 50,000 acres. North to the mountains, south to the river, east and west as far as the eye can see. It's beautiful. Do you know what I see when I look at it? Jake asked. What? A legacy? Something worth fighting for? Something worth building on? Catherine leaned against him. My father spent 40 years building this ranch. And when he died, everyone expected me to fail. They said a woman couldn't run an operation this size. That I'd have to sell or marry someone who could manage it for me. Let me guess, you told them to go to hell. Something like that. She laughed. And then I worked myself half to death proving them wrong. And you did. I did. But, Jake, I'm tired of doing it alone. Then don't. I'm right here. They stood together as the sun set over the double R, painting the grasslands gold and red. Below them, hands were bringing in horses for the night. Smoke was rising from the bunkhouse cook fire, and the ranch that Catherine had fought so hard to keep was settling into evening routine. You know what people are going to say, Catherine said quietly. About us? They'll say I'm a fortune hunter. That I seduced you for your money. Does that bother you? Not if it doesn't bother you. She turned to face him. I've spent my whole life worrying about what people say. I'm done with that. All I care about is whether this is real. It's real, Jake promised. I don't have much, Catherine. No money, no land anymore, nothing but my name and my word. But what I have is yours if you want it. She kissed him again, fierce and sure. I want it. I want you. Then you've got me. They stayed up there until the stars came out, making plans for the future. The ranch needed work, expansion in some areas, consolidation in others. Jake had ideas about breeding programs and water management. Catherine had contacts and capital and business savvy. Together, they could build something even bigger than what her father had created. But more than that, they could build a life. The next morning, Jake woke in his own room but found Catherine already working in the office. She looked up when he entered and smiled, and it felt like the sun coming out. Ready to get to work, Mr. Morrison? Always, Miss Brennan. She stood and came around the desk. Actually, I think when we're alone, you can call me Kate. He pulled her close. I thought Kate was just someone you pretended to be. No, Catherine was thoughtful. Kate was who I wanted to be. Someone simple without all the weight of this ranch in my name. Someone who could just be herself. But you can't really be Kate. I can be both. Catherine in the world, Kate with you. That works for me. They went to work then, side by side, running the largest ranch in the territory. And if people talked about the mysterious man who'd appeared from nowhere to capture Catherine Brennan's heart, well, let him talk. Jake Morrison had found something worth more than land or money or reputation. He'd found a partner, a purpose, and a place to belong. 3 months later, they married in a simple ceremony with Charlie Henderson as witness and half the ranch hands in attendance. Catherine wore a blue dress that made her eyes look like storm clouds, and Jake wore his best suit that was still worn at the elbows. When the preacher asked if anyone objected, there was only silence. Even the men who doubted Catherine's choice could see the way Jake looked at her, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. And the way she looked at him, like he was the answer to a question she'd been asking her whole life. The reception was held in the big barn with music and dancing and more food than a small army could eat. Jake danced with his bride under lanterns hung from the rafters while the hands clapped and stomped. "This is perfect," Catherine whispered in his ear. "This is everything. It's just the beginning," Jake promised. And he was right. It was just the beginning of a partnership that would last 40 years, through droughts and boom times, through the changing of the territory into statehood, through the modernization of ranching and the coming of the railroad. Through all of it, Jake Morrison and Catherine Brennan stood together, equals in every way that mattered. They built on what her father had started, expanding the Double R until it was legendary throughout the West. They raised horses that won races and cattle that set market records. They employed hundreds of men over the years, paying fair wages and earning fierce loyalty in return. But more than any of that, they built a life based on trust and respect, and the kind of love that starts in a blizzard when one person saves another without expecting anything in return. Sometimes, late at night, Catherine would wake to find Jake standing at the window of their bedroom looking out at the ranch. "What are you thinking about?" she'd ask. He'd turn and smile. "How lucky I am that you got lost in that storm." I didn't get lost. She'd join him at the window. I knew exactly where I was going. Just took a different path to get there. And every time, he'd pull her close and know that truer words had never been spoken. Because sometimes the path you don't plan is the one that leads you exactly where you need to be.